Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday night. Now, more confusion and revelations over the probe into Russia and whether it had contact with the Trump campaign. There's also a whole lot of drama that's happening as it relates to the House Intelligence Community. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Nunes, said today he will not step down and will not recuse himself from the bipartisan investigation into Russia ties.
We're doing a very thorough job on this investigation. As you know, this Russia issue, we have been on it for many, many years, and so we'll continue to be on the issue.
Democrats say that Nunes has compromised his impartiality after it came to light that he met with a quote-unquote source at the White House last week.
Mr. President, it could very well be the case that Chairman Nunes was briefing members of the administration about an investigation of which they are the subject.
Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, weighing in.
Should Nunes recuse himself from the Russia investigation? And two, do you know the source of his information?
No one knows.
Chairman Nunes had originally stood together with the ranking Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff, to dispel President Trump's allegations of wiretapping by the Trump administration.
President talking about tapping Trump Tower. That evidence still remains the same, that we don't have any evidence that that took place.
But that message became muddied last week when Nunes met with President Trump, Trump claiming the president's surveillance claims were vindicated. And now it has come to light that just a day before that, Nunes was at the White House meeting with somebody, but Nunes, he will not say with whom. And that's not the end of this controversy. Washington Post is saying that the White House wanted to block Sally Yates from testifying in the congressional hearing. Now, you'll remember she was the one that was fired as acting attorney general after refusing to enforce the president's first travel ban. The Post article saying in part, quote, Yates and another witness at the planned hearing, former CIA Director John Brennan, had made clear to government officials by Thursday that their testimony to the committee probably would contradict some statements that White House officials had made, according to a person familiar with the matter who spoke in the condition of anonymity. Now, on Friday, when Yates' attorney sent a letter to the White House indicating that she still wanted to testify, the hearing was then canceled. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, for his part, totally denying the thrust of that. Take a listen for yourself.
We have no problem with her testifying, plain and simple. The report in the Washington Post is 100% false.
And joining us now for more on this, New York Congressman Joe Crowley. He is chairman of the Democratic Caucus. I'm going to get your response to when pressed Congressman Nunes on questions about his impartiality and his ability to continue to run the committee. He said, why would I not? And when told about concerns about Democrats like yourselves, he says, that sounds like their problem. For people who haven't followed it as close, why do you believe we're past the time where he ought to recuse himself? And is this just a Democrats' problem?
Well, I think, Richard, that when you couple the fact that the chair of the Intel Committee, Mr. Nunes, was also a member of the Trump administration transition team, that he's intimate with not only the president, but everyone else who seems to be the focus of the president investigation by the Intel Committee, which he chairs, is very much akin to the situation that I think the Attorney General Sessions had when he became the Attorney General, recognized that he was too close to the campaign itself, that he was too close to the president and to those around him, that he recused himself on any issues pertaining to the issue of Russia and the investigation into their involvement or intrusion into our electoral process. And so I think where that moment really came in terms of the coupling here was the visit to the White House, to the SCIF room, which is a highly secured, the SCIF is a highly secured room that exists in the White House. It also exists at the State Department, as well as one here in the Capitol, as well as other parts of the country. They exist. He went to the White House SCIF room where he received information. We're not really sure where it came from yet, and then came back to the Capitol, and at some point went back to the White House to give that information to the president. Did not go to the regular channel, sharing it with the staff or with the other members of the committee, either the Democrat or Republican. And that's why I believe now, maybe just for the purposes of appearance, but I think it may be well beyond that at this point. He needs to resign or should recuse himself at this point.
He says just the Democrats' problem. You've articulated why you think it goes beyond that, but I'm curious. Republicans, both on the Intelligence Committee and folks that maybe won't go on TV, but obviously that you've talked to and known for years, do they also say what the bleep is going on here, or do they stand, because I haven't heard any Republican criticism in the House at least, do they think that we're almost nearing the point here where they need a different face on this?
Well, Richard, let me ask you a question. Have you heard a criticism from any member of the House of Donald Trump? Have you heard any criticism of anyone? And it's deafening. The silence is deafening. So I think if we're going to wait for anyone to criticize, I think one of the telltale signs is when someone says they have the full faith and confidence of my office. Well, we've heard that already from the Speaker about Mr. Nunes. Maybe that's a precursor to what may end up happening here. But I think this is too serious an issue about the safety and soundness of our small d democracy. That's what this investigation is. It's not about who recuses, who resigns. It's about how deep the talons of the Kremlin are in our executive branch, certainly in the elective process as well, whether it is intentional or unintentional, the involvement of the administration. That's what this investigation is about. And I think that Mr. Nunes, unfortunately, has compromised himself, at least visibly compromised himself.
What can you tell us about whether or not Sally Yates will in fact testify? We already know that Comey, Admiral Rogers, Clapper, other meetings have already been postponed, if not indefinitely. Will Sally Yates be testifying?
Well, it's already being reported that the White House tried to scuttle her testimony. And again, whether that's true or not remains to be seen. But I do think it's incredibly odd that a hearing that was scheduled today for Ms. Yates, for Mr. Clapper, as well as others within the intel community, that meeting was scuttled today. So I think that again, Mr. Nunes, who I think has really compromised his position here as the chair and does need to recuse himself.
There's a lot of folks who'll say, well, listen, isn't Comey looking into this? At the end of the day, won't the feds do a better job at getting to the bottom of this than the House, which seems to be, falling along partisan lines or whatever else? Short of an independent commission here, even if they move Nunes out and they bring in Gowdy, isn't that just rearranging the deck chairs? Talk about why you think it's critical the House does, in fact, continue an investigation.
Well, twofold. First of all, I do think that I've called for an independent commission. So I feel very confident that this does need to have an independent commission. But putting that aside for a moment, and you can have an independent commission simultaneously having the House continue to do its work. One of the biggest responsibilities of the legislative branch of government is to, from time to time, hold the executive accountable. And that's one of our biggest charges in our Constitution. So we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and that is to have oversight and to call the executive to us, whether it be the president directly or those around him. And that's what we're doing right now.
And I know this is going to sound like a partisan softball for you, but this is the Oversight Committee for Intelligence. The idea that the head of it is running to the very people that they're supposed to be overseeing to tip them off before they even tell the other people in their committee what they have. It's insane. I mean, to the layperson, it just sounds awful. And then every day there's more drips and drabs about what went on. You do realize, I'm sure you hear it, I know you believe in it, but you also hear from the regular person, what's going on here?
Well, it's exactly why I say, if for nothing else, by appearance only, that Mr. Nunes has created a conflict here by appearance. And it's exactly why I think he needs to recuse himself as the chair of this particular committee, not as the chair of the overall committee itself, but on this particular investigation, so that we can get to the bottom of it, that the committee can continue to do its work, and do that with another person at the head of the realm. And I think that's what the expectation is, and I think going forward, that's what's going to happen.
Last question, Congressman. You heard the president in one of his tweets say, don't worry about health care. me and the Democrats are going to work out some grand bargain on this. You'd know better than anybody. I'm talking to the right guy. Was that news to you, or are you guys working something in the backroom that's going to make everybody happy here?
It's news to all of us here on the Hill. There's been no communication, certainly with me in my office. I know of none with Leader Pelosi, nor with Leader Schumer in the Senate. I did hear the president blame Leader Schumer and Leader Pelosi and Democrats for their inability to pass a bill last week. But there's been no indication yet that they want to come to negotiate. And quite frankly, I think this president would have to change an awful lot about his behavior and his agenda, before Democrats want to be negotiating with him either.
Well, I know I've been swamped with votes all day. I really appreciate you making the time for us, Congressman Crowley. Thank you as always.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, for more, let's bring in Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent.
Where to begin?
Right, except at the most base level. Listen, we're all big boys and big girls. Everybody knows there's partisanship in Washington. When Democrats are in office, Democrats are protective of this. But just to disabuse anyone, Andrew, that this is the way it's always done. The House Intelligence Oversight Committee that are supposed to be looking into if the Russians, and we all believe they hacked us, you've even got the guy saying the president lied about being wiretapped by his predecessor, that same guy, that we're not bringing people to testify that no, we're canceling some of those hearings, or at least delaying them. He's running to the president to let him know something before he even lets the other members of his own committee know. He won't even reveal to him sources as to what's out there, whether it's real or not, or inflated. The perception, which I don't think is unfair, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is that they're working to protect the president from embarrassing information coming to we, the people, the taxpayers' attention. That's not supposed to be remotely how it works, and that's not how it works.
No, that's almost never how it works. You never have the regulators that cozy with the people who they're investigating. Regulators is a bad way of putting it, because these are the oversight people.
Right.
These are the people in charge of, figuring out if anybody's done anything untoward or done anything wrong. And there is a real concern that Chairman Nunes is running interference for this White House. We know that he went to the White House that day before, that he met with somebody at the White House the day before he had that press conference, that he attempted to provide some cover to the Trump White House with. The reaction to that from President Trump was, I feel somewhat vindicated by all this. But he didn't say anything that we didn't really already know, that Trump administration members were caught on secondary wiretaps. We were wiretapping the Russian ambassador, and we wound up with people from the team who got caught up on that. We know that because that's how we found out that Jeff Sessions was meeting with the Russians. And we know that because that's how we know that Mike Flynn was meeting with the Russians.
And by the way, what I think gets lost in this, that's not flattering to the Trump administration, that their folks during the course of the campaign were caught in a wiretap.
But the process by which Nunes brought that information to light in a way that appeared to provide maximum cover to the White House, and the lack of clarity, the lack of follow-through, the lack of any additional information, and he's not even sharing his sources with anybody now, it seems... What cannot be answered right now is, did Nunes go to the White House, meet with somebody, we don't know from who, we don't know from what agency, we don't know what the purpose of that was, as part of an attempt to make the White House look better, to protect them from the allegations.
I think it goes beyond it, Andrew. It's not just to put a nice sheen on this for them. They seem to not to want to learn the truth, which is as bad an indictment as you can say about what a task committee is responsible to do. Now, if you go back in history to Watergate, that was a bipartisan committee, and you have Republicans far-right Republicans who were as vocal as anyone to get to the bottom of what happened with Richard Nixon and his aides. It is the antithesis of what happened. I'm not making the connotation to Watergate yet with this story at all. But my point is, your job is to find fact. Your job is to get as much information as possible to create an environment where it's welcome, not to put out rumor and innuendo, but get to fact. And right now, there's so much spinning, you get dizzy. I thought back to a local story many of our viewers, especially our New Jersey viewers, will remember. At the beginning of Bridgegate, when it came to light what happened and there was some connection with the Christie office, the governor and his surrogates with taxpayer money, I may add, paid Randy Mastro to come up with a report to see what happened. It was a punchline because it was such a joke that it was so slanted and so favorable to the Christie administration. It almost said like they did a public service by shutting down the GW, okay? To that end, whatever the House Intelligence Committee comes out with a report right now, people will understandably at this point not believe what's said on it. And I don't know where we go from here. Not that they're the final word, but they're an important one.
Mastro was paid by Christie, so it was kind of obvious before the report came out what it was likely to say. I mean, you pay for what you get in a spot like that. Nunes is an elected congressman who swore an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend the Constitution. If he is running essentially the same thing that Mastro ran, which is, I'm just providing cover for this guy, he's in violation of his oath, much less in violation with the spirit of what his job is supposed to be. He shouldn't, not only should he not be part of this investigation, he shouldn't be chairing that committee, he shouldn't be in Congress, if that's the case. And then we come to the big question as to why the Trump administration is seeming to try to prevent the truth from coming out, in this case, in whatever way, shape, or form they can. And that's either because they know they did something they shouldn't have done and they're trying to cover it up, which remains a plausible scenario, that they're simply following the standard Trump procedure that he got from Roy Cohn back in the day, which is never admit anything, don't back down. But if you're doing that, don't you have a responsibility to help the truth get to the American people? Or the third possibility, which seems less and less likely, is that there's absolutely nothing to it, that despite all this smoke, there's no fire. Let's discount that possibility because there's too much smoke.
Well, we'll keep you updated on this story because, as they say, day by day, it seems to change. All right.